The desert night pressed down on the little frontier town like a coffin lid. Dust clung to every boardwalk plank, every shutter, every mouth that whispered as people drifted out of the saloon and down toward the corral by the sheriff's office. They weren't there for cattle. They weren't there for horses. They were there for her. The Comanche woman sat with her back against the rough-sawn wall of the makeshift holding pen, her wrists bound with leather straps, her ankles tied just loose enough to let her stumble if they forced her to walk. A lantern swung above her, throwing her shadow long across the dirt like a caged animal's. She could hear the piano from the saloon, the drunken laughter, the hiss of men whispering about what she'd fetch come sunrise. "Sheriff says we're putting her up at dawn," one voice slurred. "Worth more than a mare, that one," another chuckled. A third spat into the dirt. "Or less, depends who's buyin'." Their laughter rose, sharp and cruel, like coyotes on the ridge. She turned her face away, dark hair falling across her cheek. Pride was the only weapon left to her. She would not let them see her fear. But inside, her chest ached with a storm. Of memory, the soft rush of river water against stones, the smell of sweetgrass in summer, her grandmother's hands weaving patterns in buckskin. She saw her people's faces all gone now, scattered by soldiers' rifles and fire. She was the last. Or at least it felt that way. The sheriff strolled by, swinging his keys, spurs jangling. A fat man with tobacco stains on his shirt and a smirk that had never once known kindness. He leaned against the pen and looked down at her as if she were no more than a mule up for trade. "You'll fetch a fine price, girl," he drawled, wiping spit from his lip. "Cooking, cleaning, maybe something else. You make yourself useful, and maybe someone'll treat you decent, or not." She said nothing. Silence was strength. But when he walked off, her shoulders shook not with tears, but with rage. The bonds at her wrists burned. She imagined breaking them, grabbing his pistol, and showing him what Comanche blood was worth. But fantasy was a fool's fire. She was weak, hungry, and watched by too many eyes. The hours bled by slow. The town never slept, not fully. Lanterns glowed in windows. Boots clattered over boardwalks. Drunken songs carried on the dry wind. And she sat, counting her breaths, whispering to the spirits of her ancestors. When the first streaks of gray cracked the horizon, the crowd came. Men in dust-stained coats. Ranchers with hats pulled low. A gambler in a velvet vest. Even a woman or two, one of them the madam from the upstairs rooms of the saloon, her painted lips curling with curiosity. Sheriff climbed up on a crate, clapping his hands. "Gather round, folks. Got something special for you this morning. Ain't every day you get labor walking right into your town. Strong back, nimble hands, knows her way round a fire. This here gal can be yours startin' bid $5. The crowd erupted, half with laughter, half with eager murmurs. Her throat tightened. $5. That was what they thought her worth. The first bid rang out. "5!" shouted a rancher with a scar on his cheek. "6!" barked a drifter with whiskey on his breath. 7. The brothel madam purred, fanning herself. The voices climbed, each number slamming into her chest like a nail. She clenched her fists. She thought of her grandmother's stories, that a person's spirit was not in chains, that even when bound, the heart could not be sold. But the sound of men shouting her price stripped her bare. Something inside her broke loose. Her voice rose above the chaos. Raw and desperate. "I can cook," she cried, forcing her words through a throat that trembled. The crowd froze, surprised. She had not spoken once before. Now every head turned toward her. "I can sew," she pressed on, her voice cracking. "I can clean. I can mend leather, patch roofs, tend gardens. I'll be anything you need. Just," her voice faltered, but she swallowed the fear and forced it louder. Just don't sell me like cattle. For a heartbeat, the town went silent. Then came the laughter. It rolled through them like a storm, cruel and sharp, begging already. One man hooted. Listen to her. Sounds almost civilized. Better hope you can cook morn beans, girl, or you'll starve where you're going. The sheriff grinned wide, enjoying the spectacle. Well now, folks, scene's the merchandise. Can speak. Who's bid 10? The crowd roared again, numbers flying, voices shouting, fists pumping. The sun edged higher, turning the sky gold, lighting up the dust that hung between her and the free world. She shut her eyes against it all. She had begged. She had broken the silence. Pride had slipped through her fingers like sand. And yet even in the hollow of shame, a spark flickered. She was alive. She was still here. And if the spirits had not abandoned her yet, then perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a path out of the cage. The gavel slammed against wood. Sold, the sheriff cried. The crowd cheered. Boots stomped. The smell of sweat and tobacco filled the air. And in the blur of faces, jeering and grinning, she saw one man who did not laugh. He stood apart, arms crossed, hat shadowing his eyes. A stranger, tall, dust of the trail still on his coat. He did not cheer. He did not cheer. He only watched her, his gaze steady, unblinking. Her heart lurched. Because in that gaze, for the first time in endless nights of fear, she did not see hunger or cruelty. She saw something else. Something she could not yet name. Dawn's light stretched across the town like a blade of fire, cutting through the haze of dust and whiskey that clung to the main street. The crowd thickened, men elbowing for position, women leaning on railings, children darting between legs. To catch a glimpse of the morning spectacle, the Comanche woman stood in the pen, her wrists still bound, her eyes fixed on the earth beneath her bare feet. She refused to give them her gaze again, not after last night's shame. But their voices drilled into her skull, each laugh, each jeer. Another stone piled on her chest. The sheriff raised his hand, gavel in fist, his voice booming. Now, settle down. This here's a proper auction. Let's keep it civil as Dodge Creek ever gets. The crowd laughed at that, a low ripple of rough humor. He jabbed his gavel toward her. You're looking at strong stock. This gal can work sunup to sundown. No back talk. Well, not much. More laughter. Starting bid's $10. Who's first? 10. Shouted the scar-faced rancher from the front. He had a mean glint in his eyes, the kind of man who treated horses with a whip and dogs with a boot. 12. Barked the gambler in the velvet vest, a toothpick dangling from his lips. 15. Came the madam, her painted lips curling. She gave a knowing smile. Could train her right, boys. Put her to use upstairs. A roar of laughter shook the crowd. The woman's nails dug into her palms. Her stomach churned, but she kept her face still. 18, slurred a drunk, wobbling on his feet. She'll scrub my floors. 20. Scarface snapped. Glaring daggers at the drunk. The bids climbed, each number hammering at her chest. The air grew hotter, the dust thicker, the smell of sweat suffocating. She wanted to scream, to break the ropes and scatter them like leaves in a storm. Instead, she stood motionless, a single tear slipping down her cheek, hidden quickly by the curtain of her hair. The sheriff grinned wide, loving every moment. That's the spirit. Who's got 25? The gambler lifted 2 fingers. 25. The madam fanned herself, her voice purring. 30. 35. Scarface spat. The numbers leapt, climbing higher, the crowd cheering. With every call. To them, this was sport, entertainment, a morning diversion before heading back to their ranches, saloons, or card tables. Then, through the din, a new voice cut clean. Double quotes, 50. Double quotes, silence. The crowd stilled. Heads turned. The sheriff blinked, his grin faltering for the first time. There he was, the stranger. He stood near the back, one hand resting on his gun belt, the other pulling a few folded bills from his coat. His hat shaded his face, but his voice carried. "I earn $50, he repeated, as calm as if he were ordering breakfast. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 50? Who the hell's got 50 to waste on her? That's more than she's worth. The gambler scowled. 55. The stranger didn't flinch. 60, the crowd gasped. Even the madam lowered her fan, eyes narrowing. Spat into the dirt. 65. He barked, though his voice cracked under the weight of it. The stranger's reply was immediate. 100. The crowd erupted. Shouts, whistles, laughter of disbelief. 100, the sheriff repeated, stunned. He banged his gavel. $100, folks. Any takers? But the crowd was silent now. No one could match that number. Not for a Comanche woman they'd expected to pick up for pocket change. The sheriff licked his lips. Sold to the man in the hat. The gavel came down like a THUNDRCLAP. The woman's knees nearly buckled. $100. That was not a price, it was a fortune. Enough to buy cattle, land, a fine rifle. Enough to buy 3 women like her, by the cruel arithmetic of the market. Why? Why would he spend so much? The sheriff grumbled, but collected the bills, shoving them into his pocket. She's yours, stranger. Don't say I didn't warn ya, Comanche Spitfire. Good luck breaking her. The man said nothing. He only strode forward, boots steady against the boardwalk. His hand closed around the pen's latch. The iron squealed as he swung it open. She flinched when his shadow fell over her. He crouched, meeting her eyes at last. They were dark, steady, unreadable, but not cruel. Not hungry like the others. You're coming with me, he said simply. His voice was low, gravel threaded with steel. She searched his face, but it gave nothing. A mask of dust, sweat, and silence. He cut the rope at her wrists with a quick slice of his knife. The leather fell away, and her skin burned with sudden freedom. She flexed her hands, staring at the red grooves circling them. Stand up, he ordered. For a moment, she thought of refusing thought of spitting in his face, daring him to drag her. But something in his tone stopped her. It wasn't a command meant to belittle. It was a test. She rose. Slowly, stiffly, her eyes never leaving his. He nodded once, then turned to the sheriff. We're done here. The crowd groaned, disappointed. Their entertainment was over. A few men shouted curses, angry they hadn't won. Someone threw a bottle, which shattered against the dirt near her feet. The stranger didn't flinch. He put a hand to her back firm, but not cruel, and guided her through the jeering mob. They parted for him, grumbling, but no one stepped. In his path, she stumbled beside him, her legs weak from days of captivity. The town blurred around her faces, twisted in mockery, hands pointing, mouths spewing laughter. But through it all, the stranger's hand never wavered. They reached the edge of town where his horse waded a broad-chested bay with a dark mane and intelligent eyes. Saddlebags bulged with supplies. This was no drifter's horse. This was a man prepared for long roads. He helped her into the saddle without a word, and swung up behind her. The warmth of him pressed against her back, the scent of leather and dust filling her lungs. She stiffened, every muscle ready to fight if his hands wandered, if his breath thickened. But he only took the reins. With a click of his tongue, the horse surged forward, hooves drumming against the earth. The town fell away behind them, its laughter, its jeers, its smoke and rot swallowed by the wide, endless land. For the first time, In what felt like forever, the air smelled clean. Sagebrush, dry earth warming under the sun. Freedom, Dot. And yet, was it freedom? Or just another cage, gilded by the price of $100? Her voice was a whisper, raw against the wind. Why? The stranger's reply was flat, without hesitation. Because if you want to survive, prove you're worth it. She twisted, staring at him. His eyes were hidden beneath the brim of his hat, his jaw set like stone. She could not tell if he had bought her life, or merely postponed her death. But one thing she knew, her story was not over. Not yet. The land stretched wide and endless, broken only by ridges of stone and the silver ribbon of a river winding through the dust. The stranger's horse carried them steadily across it, hooves crunching gravel, tail swishing against the flies. Hours, neither of them spoke. The Comanche woman sat stiff in the saddle, bound not by ropes anymore, but by questions. She could feel the stranger's presence behind her, solid, unyielding, like the land itself. He hadn't touched her except to steady her once when the horse stumbled. His silence was a wall she could not climb. Finally, when the sun reached its height, he reined the horse toward a cluster of cottonwoods by the river. "We'll rest here," he said. She slid down, her legs trembling, the earth spinning under her feet. He unpacked a canteen and a strip of dried beef, tossing the meat toward her without ceremony. She stared at it, suspicion tightening her chest. "You think I'll eat your scraps?" She muttered in Comanche under her breath, but hunger clawed. Too deep. She tore into the meat, the salty toughness filling her mouth, the water soothing her cracked throat. He sat across from her, chewing his own share, his gaze never softening. "You got a name?" he asked finally. Her eyes narrowed. She gave him silence. He shrugged. "Suit yourself. Folks call me Boone." Boone. The name fit him hard, simple, cut from stone. They rode again until the land began to change. Rolling grass. A wooden fence. Line stretching like a scar across the prairie. Ahead, a small ranch appeared weather-beaten, but standing proud against the wind. A house of rough boards. A barn with a sagging roof. Chickens scratching in the dirt. Her breath caught. It was no fort, no prison. Just a lonely ranch under the vast, merciless sky. Boone swung down, tying the horse to a post. He looked at her. "This is it, my land. You want to stay under my roof. You'll work. Earn your keep. No one here to wait on you." Her chin lifted. "I am no servant." His mouth twitched, the ghost of a humorless smile. "Good. Then don't act like one. Act like you mean to live." The days that followed tested her in ways she hadn't expected. Boone put her to work immediately feeding chickens, hauling, water, mending fences. She bristled at first, every task a reminder of the humiliating auction. But slowly a shift came. She found herself kneeling in the garden, hands deep in the soil. It reminded her of planting corn with her grandmother, of songs sung to the earth. She found herself cooking over a fire in the kitchen, stirring beans, remembering herbs her people used to heal the sick. One evening, Boone came in, shirt torn from a nail he'd caught in the barn. He handed it to her wordlessly. She snatched, it muttering under her breath, but her hands moved with skill needle and thread darting, stitches neat and strong. He raised a brow when she gave it back. "Didn't think you'd know sewing." "I know more than you think," she shot back, fire flashing in her eyes. For the first time, his lips curved not into a smile, but something close. But peace never lasted long in the Wild West. News traveled fast. Within days, whispers spread through Dodge Creek. Boone had bought himself a Comanche woman. Some said she was dangerous. Others said she was cursed. Many said he was a fool for wasting $100 on savage blood. One afternoon, Boone hitched up his wagon to haul grain from town. She insisted on going. She would not hide like a caged bird. The town's eyes followed her every step. Women whispered on porches. Men spat into the dirt. The gambler tipped his hat mockingly, and Scarface growled under his breath. Better watch her, Boone. Savage'll cut your throat while you sleep. Her hands trembled at her sides, but Boone's voice cut through the tension. Savage or not, he said flatly, she works harder than any of you. The crowd fell quiet, stunned at his defense. But their silence was not surrender. It was the silence of coals waiting to flare. That night, she sat on the porch, the stars blazing overhead. Boone joined her, leaning against the rail, a rifle balanced across his knees. They won't let it go, he said. Men like that, they don't like what they can't own. She glanced at him, startled. It was the longest string of words he'd given her since the auction. You paid $100, she said softly. You think that means you own me? His eyes shifted toward her, dark and steady. No, I paid to keep them from owning. You. Her breath caught. The words lodged in her chest, like an ember glowing against the cold. But before she could speak, the distant thunder of hooves rolled across the plains. Both turned their heads. Out on the horizon, under the moonlight, a group of riders approached, 6, maybe 7. Their silhouettes sharp against the silvered grass. Boone stood, cocking his rifle. His jaw tightened. They've come to collect. The riders drew up at the ranch gates, their horses snorting, breath steaming in the cool night. Scarface sat. At the front, a shotgun across his lap, eyes gleaming with hate. You know why we're here, Boone, he called. That woman belongs to the town. You don't get to keep her. Boone leveled his rifle across the porch rail. She's under my roof. She works my land. She belongs to no one. The posse laughed cruelly. She ain't your equal, Boone. She's property, same as a mule. Hand her over, or we'll burn you out. The Comanche woman stepped forward before Boone could answer, her voice cutting sharp through the night. I am not property, she said, her words like flint. Not yours, not theirs, not anyone's. The men jeered, raising their weapons. The threat thick in the air. Boone chambered around with a sharp click. If you want her, he said coldly, you'll have to go through me first. The air went still. The silence brittle as glass. Her heart pounded in her chest, torn between fear and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A prairie night was so still, it seemed the land itself held its breath. Only the creak of saddle leather and the restless snorts of the posse's horses broke the silence. Boone stood on the porch, rifle braced steady across the rail, his figure etched against the faint lantern glow spilling from the cabin door. Beside him, the Comanche woman felt her heart hammer like a war drum. She had no weapon, no shield, only the fire inside her chest and the choice to stand, not cower. Scarface leaned forward in his saddle, shotgun glinting in the moonlight. Last chance, Boone. Hand her over and we'll ride out quiet. Refuse, and you'll be buried before sunrise. Boone's voice was calm, cold as river stone. I don't hand people over. The words hung in the air. A challenge. A line in the sand. Scarface spat into the dirt. So be it. The blast came sudden, and savage Scarface fired first, his shotgun booming like thunder, spraying pellets. Across the porch, wood splintered, lantern glass shattered. The chickens squawked in terror. Boone dropped behind the rail, returning fire in 2 sharp cracks. One rider screamed, tumbling from his horse into the dust. Chaos erupted. The posse charged, guns barking, hooves pounding. The ranch was swallowed by gunfire, smoke, and the screams of men and animals. The woman dove behind a barrel, heart racing, hands trembling. Fear clawed at her throat. But then she saw Boone firing, reloading, standing unshaken against 7 armed men. Alone, something inside her shifted. She would not hide. Not again. She scrambled to the barn, dodging bullets that spat sparks against the dirt. Inside, her eyes landed on an old bow hanging from a rafter-weathered, dusty, but strung. Beside it, a bundle of arrows. Boone must have taken them from some raid years ago. Her hands knew what to do before her mind caught up. Fingers wrapped around the bow's grip. She knocked an arrow, breath steadying, muscles remembering the lessons of her childhood. She slipped out the barn's shadow and drew. The bowstring kissed her cheek. Trum. The arrow flew, striking a rider square in the shoulder. He howled, falling. From his horse. The posse faltered, eyes widening. The savage fights back. One shouted. But fear rippled through their ranks. They hadn't expected Boone to stand. They hadn't expected her to rise. She loosed another arrow, then another, each strike forcing the attackers back, each heartbeat steadying her own. Her fear melted into focus, her shame into fire. Scarface roared in rage, spurring his horse forward. He aimed his shotgun straight at her, eyes wild. Savage witch. Boone's rifle cracked. Scarface jerked, eyes wide with shock, then slumped sideways, sliding bonelessly from the saddle. His shotgun clattered useless to the dirt. The rest of the posse froze. Without their leader, their bravado shriveled. One by one, they yanked their reins, turning their horses. Within seconds, they were fleeing across the prairie, shadows swallowed. By moonlight, the ranch fell silent again, save for the distant thud of retreating hooves. Smoke hung in the air. Chickens fluttered nervously back to their coop. Boone lowered his rifle, chest heaving. He turned toward her. She stood in the yard, bow still in hand, sweat shining on her brow, breath ragged. The moon painted her face in silver. For the first time since her capture, she didn't feel like prey. She felt alive. She felt unbroken. Boone walked to her, slow and steady. He stopped a few paces away, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You fight like. You mean to live. He said. She gripped the bow tighter, chin lifting. I do live. Not because you bought me. Not because they spared me. Because I chose to. He nodded once, as if her words confirmed something he already believed. Then, to her shock, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded paper, the bill of sale from the sheriff. He tore it clean in 2, then in 4, then in pieces so small the wind carried them away into the night. You don't belong to me, Boone said quietly. You never did. You're free. Her breath caught. The word echoed in her chest like a drumbeat. Free. She stared at him, searching for the trick, the snare, the hidden chain. But his face remained stone, only his eyes flickering with something softer, something scarred but human. You can leave. In the morning, he said, take the horse if you need. Or you can stay, not as property, not as a servant, but as my equal. Choice is yours. She turned her gaze east. The horizon was already paling, dawn creeping up, soft and golden. Just 24 hours ago, she had been waiting for sunrise as a death sentence and auction block. Chains, humiliation. Now, the same sun rose on something else. Possibility. She looked back at Boone, at the ranch behind him, at the torn scraps of paper scattering like ash in the breeze. I will stay, she said finally, her voice steady. Not because you paid for me, not because you spared me, but because I choose to walk forward, not back. His jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. He gave a short nod. Then we'll make it work. She lowered the bow at last, the tension leaving her shoulders. For the first time in endless nights, she allowed herself to breathe deep. The air was hers. The land. was hers, her life hers. And so the Comanche woman, who had once begged under the cruel laughter of a crowd, stood unbroken on her own ground. She had been bought, but she had not been owned. She had been threatened, but she had not been silenced. The Wild West was harsh, merciless, and unforgiving, but in its dust and fire, she had carved something fierce and unshakable. Freedom. Her story whispered a truth the town would not forget. You can put a price on a body, but never on a soul. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because stories like this remind us the strongest chains are the ones we choose to break.